One thing I haven't done much of on my layout is scratch building, and some of that is due to the availability of time I've got really, and I hope to retire soon, so I've got more time on my hands so I can spend a bit of time making models from scratch. But I've had a little dabble in it, and I've been making this electrical substation, and I want to try and fit it in the embankment. Hello and welcome back to Woodhill Park. I haven't really recorded me making the main building other than taking a few photos, which you may have seen already, but this is what I've been working on, and my intention is to try and fit this into the embankment as a little diorama that I can pull out and use the flat space to film the layout either direction, up the rails you might say. So this is my little attempt at a substation. I've got some 3D printed transformers to fit in there, and the fencing I've picked up online as well and sprayed. But the building in the background is just plastic card brick sheet and foam board, and I'm adding bits and pieces off of odds and ends from old kits really. I propose to fit it in here and cut away some of the embankment and slope it either side so it looks like it's been excavated to contain this substation, and flatten the ground and just slip it in the foreground, and then I can remove it anytime I want to, if I want to put a camera there and film either direction or whatever I want to do, so I can get a bit closer to the layout, as this embankment does inhibit me from filming sometimes, and is a bit of an annoying sort of barrier between me and the layout. But saying that, if you shoot down either direction you get a nice effect of a cutting that I like as well. So in order to have both worlds you might say, I'm going to have a little diorama here so I can remove it, as I said. So fun and games, chopping the embankment about, I suppose that'll be the next stage. I've got a few more bits to do to the substation, including gluing the 3D printed transformers down, and I'm just going to glue these down with a bit of Evo stick, but I want to make them quite random, see, away from the doorway, and one direction and another direction, reasonably spaced apart. Oops, glue on there first. Right. I want a glue that I could remove the object if I wanted to. An Evo stick allows you to remove something reasonably easy, as well as being a good glue that holds things nice and fast as well. I've incorporated a gate at this end, as I would think that the guys will come in this way so they're nowhere near the transformers, and then into a steel door here which is sort of vandal proof to go in to all the equipment inside. Did a bit of vandals graffiti on the outside, might do a bit more. I didn't think I'd put graffiti inside because hopefully the fencing will keep some of these jobs out, and if not they'll probably get electrocuted anyway. Got a bit more fencing to finish off at this end. Not sure whether to put a gate in, you know, a large gate for access, or just finish the fencing off. I'll have a think on that one, and then I'll do some greenery and stuff in front here just to blend it on the baseboard when I actually fit it in. To hold the fencing down, I've used super glue all the way along the bottom, as it's probably the best glue that's going to hold the fencing, as there's very little contact with the base, only the bottoms of the fence posts. And once I put a little bit of sort of large bits of turf and stuff along here, it will take away some of the glossy glue look that it's standing on, but this has made it really rigid and it's not likely to come apart. But so it's a variation of different glues for whatever job you need. So I've used copy decks to hold the building down, so should I want to remove it, it's quite easy. And as I've already said, I've used Evo stick to hold these down, which allows me to remove these quite easy, but gives them quite a bit of strength on a small surface area that they're on to hold them down. And then, as I say, super glue along here, a high viscosity super glue though, just to make sure it's nice and strong really, because it's the thing that's going to get knocked around all the time. I've pretty much finished the fencing now and added a couple of signs on the front. Got more signage to add, just more detailing in general, but yeah, I went for just adding some more fencing, even though I didn't have a complete length, so it's a bit bitty, but that won't matter once it's weathered a bit and sits in the scenery. You won't notice. But, oh, I forgot to add that I painted the base. I think it was I think it was a Vallejo or Vallejo. I think it was black, because it's come out like a nice black tarmac, and that looks really nice and very typical of the 1980s, just a slab with black tarmac over it, and it looks a bit grotty. Now for the painful bit, cutting the embankment away to see if I can fit it in. You can see the embankment resides between two upright supports for the roof, which I can't do nothing about, but that stops me filming either direction. You know, it stops me getting in and filming, so this proposal is to remove quite a bit of this, and I thought, well, if I do remove most of it, I can then have a bit of a car park next to it where the guys would have parked, you know, in a gravelly sort of muddy car park, just to service it and visit it occasionally. So I don't want it just cut away just for the size of the actual substation. I want it a little bit bigger to allow for some more sort of flat ground, and in so doing will give me more area to film from when I remove the substation as I'm filming. So I think I'll cut it probably just a few inches along from each beam, allowing quite a bit of this to be flat. And it's going to be brute force, I think, with a saw. Got a wood saw, a Japanese modelling saw, razor saw I think they're called, and I'm just going to brutally cut it up. I also wanted it opposite this relay boxes, or set of relay boxes and stuff, but not obscuring it. So I don't want it here obscuring it, I want it off to one side a bit. As these lines are not electrified, my top area is electrified, I wouldn't thought it needed a massive substation, and so this substation in my mind is just for the control equipment along this line, so it wouldn't necessarily need a lot of power, but it would need substations. So there's no massive sort of amount of switchgear and stuff, it's just a relatively small substation, but they would need power for along this track here. And that's my story, you might say. I've already gone along here with a knife trying to get underneath the insulation that I've used, you know, the foam insulation, and I've glued it down with a hot melt glue gun. So I've just gone along there easing it away, even though I probably can't reach right through it with a knife, so that will help. I may even get this out in one piece, and if I do, who knows, it could be useful somewhere else. But it's time to go at it really with a saw, and I've got bin underneath it because all the plaster's going to go everywhere. So wish me luck, it's in with a saw. That's one cut, and because I'm right-handed I'll have to move the camera over here, but I was proposing to cut about here. I've already marked it, so through with another cut. Put the screen underneath. This saw actually cuts when you draw it back, as the teeth go the opposite to what they would normally on a saw. So as you draw it, it cuts. It's quite hard to do that. Best to just go at it. Right, I think I'm almost through. So it's just a case of going along and easing it up, I reckon. I thought I'd just use my other foam cutting knife and see if I can get right through with it. That's doing a better job. Right, that's pretty good. Very sharp knife. Managed to stab myself on the prongs on the other side of the blade. But, I think I'll live to fight another day. Well, that's pretty damn good. That's what I was hoping for. Just a case of trimming it up now, flattening it and landscaping it. Very pleased with that. Excellent. I've continued to cut away the plaster near the railway and the ballast to take the substation right up to the edge of the ballast, and I've undercut the ballast where there's sculpt mould so that the edge of the base of the substation tucks into it, and that's come out fairly well, because if I show you in a minute, I'll just pick it up and put it in place, and it tucks into that gap there rather nicely. And if I go wander about with the camera and show you the other side, there's hardly any rework needed up against the wall, as it tucks in nicely. So a few little well placed bushes or weeds, and I won't even need to touch that bit. As I said, I've made this biased one way so that you can see the switch gear in the distance. I'm also looking at what to do with the ends of the embankment I've cut off. I haven't got an embankment anything like this near me, but if it was stone, a stone substrate, I would have thought it would hold itself up, in which case they would just leave the end as like a stone finish. But if it's very weak and loose soil, they might have put a retaining wall up to hold it back, or some sort of retaining wall, or do I slope it? That's the dilemmas. So I just put a bit of brick against it just to make my mind think about what I want, really. Well, I've had a think and I've decided to slope it. I don't think they would have gone to the expense of bricking either side like that, as this infrastructure would have been created in maybe the 50s or whatever, and if it had been the Victorians, they wouldn't have worried about the labour costs of doing brickwork to hold up a retaining wall or whatever. But I think 1980s and back to the 50s, if it was here then they would have just sloped it, and that's what I'm going to do. Just slope it back and add some sculpt mould to roughen up the front of it, and then either add more undergrowth back to it or paint it in a rock face, I suppose, a sloping back rock face. But I mean, it would have had undergrowth by now growing all over it, so I'm probably going to put undergrowth on it, thinking about it. just finished with the sculpt moulding, and instead of rubbing this down with a drop of water and getting it nice and smooth, I'm going to leave it rough, so that if it shows through some of the undergrowth, it's just rough cut soil which would have been, left as the excavator would have finished with the side of the embankment. And I've put a very watery mix across the yard because I want it to look like it's all uneven and dips and stuff in it. And I've got a vehicle and I've run some tracks in like people do, just to give it a bit of a muddy effect. And I'm going to leave that, let that harden on there, and then paint it. And then I'll be adding some gravel, and I might even add some realistic water in, as can make some puddles out of it. And the other side's pretty much the same over there. It's just got it's not going to have a sort of parking area. It just runs up to the side of the substation, and I've not smoothed that down either. I'm leaving that quite rough. I've just tried the substation into the scenery, and it fits nicely there. So once I've painted everything and added detailing to the undergrowth and stuff and ballasting and stuff, it should all just fit nicely there. And hopefully I can use this part to lean my camera on as well, if I make it strong enough and hard enough with glues and resins. I was thinking about putting a fence down here between the railway and like the car park area, but I thought if I do that I'm probably going to knock that flying if I want to film, so I might just leave it open. I mean, the actual compound itself is enclosed with a fence for safety, so there was many places that you could walk onto the railway, and even though they would try and keep you out in most places, and who's to say that there isn't a fence over this side off scene to stop you going on to any of this. So there might be a yard fencing further back that people are driving through and parking here, so I'm going to leave it like that to give myself some more room to film from. Right, the sculpt mould is dried enough for me to paint it, and I've painted it, and this colour's Nutmeg Spice, and it's an acrylic paint, just like match pots you can get. I think this one was from Wilko, so you better get in quick if you want some Nutmeg Spice, because they're going out of business. Anyway, painted it, it's virtually dry, and I've put the substation into the scenery, just laid it in there, and it fits nicely. And my plan up this end looks like it's going to work quite nicely. As I kept some of the undergrowth and pushed it back, I can now pull it over and I can glue that down, and the same over this side, glue that down eventually when I start doing some of the turf and stuff, if I want to add more greenery and stuff, which I will do. And down in front of this fence, which I'm not sure I'm going to keep here, I might have it so I can do what I've done at the moment, just plug it in and then take it away when I want to film. But it's up to a stage at the moment, and I'm quite happy with it, and I'll let it all dry nicely, and before I start sort of gluing and adding any scenery bits and pieces to it. So this is what it looks like from this side, and I'm liking what I've done there, really. I think that's a good way to film the layout, and also add a bit of interest rather than just an endless embankment over this side. Right, it's the next day, and the paint's all dry. Deep down the sculpt mould underneath could be a bit damp, but that will steadily dry over the days ahead. But as long as you don't pull it about too much, it is a little bit soft underneath, it won't be a problem. And I've got all these various scatters in the background that I'm going to use in doing this area. I want to end up with a slightly gravelly sort of muddy car park, and just continue the undergrowth either side really down to meet the substation, and end up with some weeds and stuff growing around the substation. So I better get on with it. It's now a few hours later, and it's pretty much on the way to being dry. So I'm just going to add some, I think it's called realistic water. You can get various versions of it, and just add a few puddles to this. This stuff really is amazing, because it's been months since I've used most of it, and just with a lid on it, there's only about 10 ml left in the bottom of the bottle, and it's still as liquid as anything. And the last time I used it just to make a pud or whatever, it went off straight away. So it's amazing that this hasn't gone off in a container, but for some reason it hasn't, even though a majority of it's air. So A very good product really, and this is what I'm going to make my puddles out of. So just this and a pipette, suck some of it up in the pipette and then work out where you want the puddle, usually a depression, in this case around here, possibly there, and more over here. Just a case of working out where your left dips for a puddle to form. If it works like it has in the past, this will just go off overnight. But I think that's roughly it. So what's left in here hopefully will continue to carry on being liquid, and I can use it on something else. Amazing stuff. I'm going to carry on just adding a bit more foliage to where the substation's going to sit, because there is a little gap between the edge of this and where the substation's going to sit. So just add some well placed foliage. Then just quite a very light vacuum up. If I can get hold of the vacuum cleaner. You could save this, but I've already saved it once before, so it's only odds and ends. Now when substation fits in there and goes back, there shouldn't be a gap of any sort of consequence. I think most of it is taken up. A bit of foliage. And it still allows me to remove it. Basically it's finished now. Once this realistic water dries across the car park, that's pretty much it. I can still add the odd bush and a bit of detail in here and there, and it's like most things, it's never finished if you want to add more. And you know, you can add a bit of paint, like an acrylic sort of rusty colour to the fencing, make some of the fencing look a bit rusty and aged, a bit more signage, but basically it's finished and it now sits in the landscape quite neatly, I reckon. Definitely adds more interest to this part of the layout and will allow me access to film as well. really enjoyed putting this building together and adding more and more detail and just seeing it come to life. It's a good way to get into real modelling, really, I suppose. Scratch building is very rewarding, you might say. I've now regained my view up and down the lines in the cutting and embankment, so I'm very pleased with the outcome, and can't wait to do more things like this, just adding little sort of scenic bits that add more interest to the layout, you might say. This bit of landscaping was by no means certain when I started it. I did wonder how it was going to come out, as it's quite drastic cutting your scenery away like I did, but it often pays off, and there's many ways out of a disaster. Even if it does go wrong, you can play about with it and improve it, and it's amazing what you can do. You just need to sort of have the guts to have a go, really, and I very much enjoyed doing this. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and keep on subscribing and liking the channel if you enjoy what you see. Thanks very much. Bye for now.